prepare real structured kind of speech. Just thought I'd talk a little bit about maybe what we've been doing, the challenges that we've been facing for the past, I guess it's 8-9 weeks. I haven't really figured the exact amount of time, and give you a sense of what's going on in City Hall and city government, the good and the not so good, some of the challenges, and what we hope to do over the next 4 years, moving the city forward. And I think the fun part, if there is one, will be to answer questions. So I want you to think about questions you might have for me about anything I say or things that I don't bring up. But Carol and I do have a good relationship for many, many years. She does a phenomenal job at everything. So thank you, Carol. Thank you for that kind introduction. She did a great job when we worked together in the city as well. I also have 3 other people here that I have the pleasure of working with. The guy with the telephone, we can't afford a camera in the city, so he's filming this, I guess. Bob Harris is the communications director for the city. I kind of had very few people I had to kind of work hard to encourage to come work in Bridgeport. Sometimes when you get elected, in this case re-elected, you have a lot of people that kind of knock on the door and say, hey, can we be a part of the administration? And that is a positive thing, but it's challenging. But what I did reach to Av, he'd done some great work in the Secretary of State's office and upstate, and so I think we're lucky to have him in Bridgeport. He wants to make sure he gets that part of the film, for sure, right? And I think you may know him, and if you don't, also with me, he wears a lot of hats and does a tremendous job. One is a state representative. I say that now because they're in session, but throughout the year, dealing with the tender issues in the neighborhoods as a religious leader, also president of the Interdenominational Ministry Alliance, Reverend State Representative and Senior Advisor, who works closely with me in the Mayor's office, Dr. Charles Stallworth. I think you know Dr. Stallworth as well. Another gentleman who, despite his talents and his hard work, has made a full-time commitment, then some, to betterment and improving the quality of life in the city on a number of fronts. So it's a pleasure and an honor, and I think we're really lucky to have him helping us in city government and in Hartford and as a religious leader as well. Sergeant Detective Wood. Ray Garcia, member of the Bridgeport Police Department, is with us as well. Ray wears a lot of hats in the police department, but also in the mayor's office, solving a lot of challenges that we have that come to our office. He's been a real asset out there, knows the neighborhood, so he's been a real big help as well. A whole host of other individuals that are nameless now that have agreed to come into city government have been a big help since we took over December 3rd. And when we took over December 3rd, I'll tell you, they look like funny, they sound like funny stories, but we physically get in the office, and within a week or so, I start to have a smell in the mayor's office. And I couldn't figure out what it was. You probably know some of it was in the paper. And then we're in these meetings, with all these big important people. I'm sitting there, we're swatting flies. And finally the smell got so bad, I moved my office, physically myself and the computer, out to the conference room. There were dead squirrels in the drawers and in the ceiling and in the closets. And of course in the context of what was kind of a tough, rough and tumble campaign, you wonder how they got there. And those that are more cynical say that it wasn't an accident and they didn't jump off of the tree and land there. That it's an old political trick you do to your successor. But be it as it may, we had the jokes a little bit, and it usually lightens up a meeting. But I physically, as frustrating as it was to go in and take over with not the best of communications and transitions, it was equally awkward to actually physically have to set up outside of your office. If you ever had to do that, like in the conference room and meet people, and they look at you kind of funny. But we had that. But we also had some interesting challenges too with the knowledge, I think, of the day before we were going in, trying to figure out what it might look like as far as the budget and things like that, and find out the contracts for major labor unions were kind of passed and paid by special payroll last minute before we got in, that left us to start off with. We knew we were $2.5 million short in halfway into a budget year, and then began to unravel what looked like even worse financial challenges, and found that we were tens of millions of dollars in the red, with the over projection on some revenues and some under projections on some expenditures, and to begin to look back at some of what Carolyn cited as my experience of trying to deal with budget deficits and projected outwards, and pulled in some of the experienced members of city government that were still there, who had served through some of the dark financial times, and said, look guys, we really need to know at bottom how bad this financial situation looks. We got 6 months to deal with it, and I don't want to end the year in a deficit. We are still working through that process, but some good news on that front is we, as recently as last week, went to the credit rating agencies in New York, explained to them that we wanted to refinance some $60 million in bonds, and with that we'll save the city $3.5 million this year, and $4 million next year, and $3 or $4 million the following year, as a way to chip away, which is probably close to, or still close to a $20 million projected deficit. We've reeled in overtime from Public Works, from the fire department and the police department, not because we want to cut back on the ability to deliver services, but it just wasn't being managed. And again, I don't take any of this as a criticism of my predecessors. I'm just telling you how it looks as we got there now. We're managing it. We've shuffled around administrative positions within the upper levels of the police department, as opposed to where the officers are meeting with calls, and have a projection to reduce that by a substantial amount, probably $2 million, and still be able to deliver not only on our commitment to public safety, but to find enough money to follow through on what I call a campaign promise. I don't really like to use that term, but which was that the police manning levels had been allowed to drop to between 70 and 80 officers below what they should be, and I made a commitment to hire north of that, 80 to 100 officers, and I want to do it in the first year. I announced the first class of supposed to be north of 30, but close to 30, and we'll follow it up with 2 classes as quickly as we can of additional officers of 30 each, so that we will get back to what I think is a full complement, or as close to a full complement as we can get in a short period of time, to provide better police presence, a larger or a better complement of officers, and begin to do things like interact with members of the public on a preventative and proactive way, in a term that's referred to as community policing, and which will really go a long way to helping us reduce some of the challenges we have in all parts of our city, but more dramatically in some neighborhoods. So digging out financially is part of it, but at the same time, we've seen some real positive and good things happen. 2 weeks ago, I was down in Washington, and at the same time we were down there,